Welcome to the first patch update, where we will cover Eternal Return patches and how things have landed. The main patches we will be discussing are 1.34 and 1.35. These patches saw major tourneys played on them for both ERCS, the NA scene, and ERM, the Korean scene. Because of this, and the fact this is the first one, we will be giving the basic rundown of both scenes and then going over the characters in competitive, while only covering the big character differences in Soloque. A quick aside, comment what you think the devs will show in the Season 6 dev stream that we'll be covering next. The top 25 most liked will be put on the bingo board, and if I get a creator codes ever, and you all get a bingo, the people who make said bingo will get a code. But as I don't have that at the moment, it's really just there for fun. Get yourself a sweet treat if you guess right. Back to the video. I'm your host Jin, also known as Jolteon, here with my co-host
Jignut, with my in-game name being Jignut Jorgeston.
What we're going to first go over is the meta that has risen to the top for competitive.
The competitive scene has been seeing basically three main types of comps, with the most prominent being a tank and two long-range backliners that output tons of damage. The other two relevant comps are dive comps to counter these backline comps, and also sustain comps to outperform the DPS and outlast their burst.
Soloque, on the other hand, has been very burst-oriented, to the point where it matters more your range and vision control, and equally your ability to escape, than just your damage. Because of this, and because of how safe teams are playing, there's a high team count late into the game, leading to some less than charitable situations with, say, 6 teams day 5. First, we're going to cover competitive, and as you can see here, I have this little handy-dandy tier list for what we've been seeing and what you can expect. To go over the tiers really fast, we have Pick Ban. These characters have a high presence and a high strength. No one really does their job like them. Characters in Good are overall solid characters with a niche in the meta. You'll see them every now and then, but not a main staple. Can be built around is just as the name implies. These characters have to have a count built around them in order to work in competitive, but they do work. Someone else does their job better. These are characters you won't usually see unless another one of the characters that they just, get outclassed by is banned. And not viable are characters you will most likely never see in a competitive scene.
So the most picked character in ERCS and ERM was Nadine, specifically the crossbow variant of being the auto attack version. Nadine has insanely high burst damage and also DPS when she has her ult available. She wins trades very easily with her high damage output, and her monkey wire makes her very safe and hard to catch. She also has very good zone control with her traps on the ground, and with proper team coordination, she's very hard to track down and kill while outputting enormous amounts of damage.
Next, our number 2 consistently banned character is Mai, the best tank in the format, and it's probably not going to change anytime soon. Mai has built-in support for her 2 carries right now in our most popular comp of 1 tank, 2 backliner, meaning this character is going to absolutely dominate no matter what. She can bring you in with her R, giving her W, which makes all auto attacks do 1 damage and increasing their defense. This is really strong since a lot of our top characters right now rely on autos to do damage. On top of this, because we don't have to just stop there, she has special items only she can make, making her place in competitive just cemented. A perfect team play tank with a bunch of strength and viability.
Moving on, Haze is the other super popular backliner that has risen up this patch, and crazy, but Nadine, Mai, and Haze is the most popular comp and also the best 3 characters right now. Haze plays the role of being the best poke mage in the meta. With long range, she's safe, she has escape, and once she gets her items, specifically her new Cataclysm weapon that she got this patch, she starts outputting enormous amounts of poke. You take 2 rockets and you're half HP, maybe even less.
Razi is amazing in these dive compositions that are made to counter the strongest comp in the game right now. She is great at everything she does, with amazing self-peel, meaning you don't need to invest resources into babysitting her. Amazing kiting, meaning that she'll win most 1v1s if a bruiser even tries to get on top of her. And her E, which gives her invincibility to in all manner of things. This character is very consistent and very good, despite her hard ability to play, which is why you see her most in pro play, where the best of the best are abusing her.
Emma is another strong mage. While she doesn't quite have the damage that Haze outputs, she has a point-and-click polymorph combo, which keeps someone CC'd for a very long time while also letting her team do it. It also has the potential to be AoE if the team groups up. Emma just also has an amazing neutral, and playing into her, especially as melee characters, is very difficult, as playing into her is essentially how she deals most of her damage. Scarlet Sisters was the only Emma player in ERM, and they did very well on the character. And many other players were trying to force an Emma ban, despite not being as good as the character as well, showing her actual strength and power with her CC and safety and competitive.
Next, as most people would suspect, it's Sua, ERCS's cornerstone, because one of our best players, Superior, is always on this character. As you can expect, this character has shown incredible strength this patch. There's even been a clip you'll see on screen right now of Superior almost winning in a 1v7 scenario, picking off people and getting timer back. Amazing play by him, but it also shows Sua's strength in the current meta that you really can't deny for a character that has so many tools and so many ways of dealing with all of the strong picks at the moment.
Chloe is another strong marksman style character. She had two players play her in ERM because Chloe is not a super popular character, was never banned, so she was picked every single game. She would always see success. There was two main comps, but Chloe functions more like Nadine, where she sits in the back and outputs damage, but Chloe has other good things going for her, like being able to stay alive because of her ult, and also being able to follow up on CC with her knock-up and slow. She's able to easily run over games and even chunk down tanks very quickly by using Frailty, and once she gets her items, she's hard to kill and she outputs a ton of damage.
Johan, the current best support in the game and downright disgusting at times, seen walking at people and never dropping below 70%. He really came into strength from the new items and healing factor getting buffed. You can really see him just do so much in these games because he's such an anti-burst character. And unlike another character Charlotte will talk about later, all of his stuff is instant and on good CDs, making him so strong in both solo queue and competitive.
Celine is another powerful backline mage whose strengths lie in the area management and having little downtime on her damage. Celine is great in a variety of comps, but shines most with slower playstyles, demonstrated by Sparkle Esports and ERM. They showed off her consistency and the ability to be the glue of their already strong team comp.
Elena, the best dive tank currently in competitive. She saw a lot of play in ERCS, and G-Work was often playing her in ERM. Elena shows most of her strengths in these counter meta comps, where she can just run down characters like Nadine with proper W use. She has a lot of escape as well, making her an incredibly safe tank to play. Jast from ERCS was holding together their team as the anchor with some of the highest assists we've seen. Very dominant character that just works so well and holds so many of these good counter meta comps together.
Marcus is another frontline tank that leans more to the aggressive side. He has a lot of things in his kit. He has a lot of sustain from his healing off his Q auto attack damage, and even on full tank items, he is still able to output lots of good damage thanks to his scalings. He has CC change, he has engaged combos, he builds full tank and he's unkillable. He has force field, he has solar system, and he has especially the healing from his critical blow passive on his axe as well. So he's just able to set up the team, set up CC combos, deal good damage, and be unkillable, all as a tank in one.
And for our final pick ban character, more of an ERM pick, less seen in ERCS, is Adina. There's really nothing wrong with this character. She has good range, good CC, good utility, high damage. She's undoubtedly the best flex mage in the entire game. She's a harder character to pilot, but despite that, she brings so much to the table. You find so many of these great players bringing her out and taking her to so many of these matches.
Moving on to the good part of the tier list. First we have Rio. Rio is very similar to Nadine, where she's a backline auto attacker. She has a lot of utility going for her with a bow skill and also her ult having either the long range high slow for that can also be AoE if she hits it, and also the self peel of her short bow ult, which pushes enemies back and can also stun them if they hit a wall. Rio is, like I said, not as good as Nadine, however still very good. She has a bit more range than Nadine. She still has good damage output, just not quite as good.
Now going into Scylla, the Shuriken variant. Scylla has a lot going for her, but she isn't a pick ban character. She's very good at catching people out. Probably the best mage we have in the format for it, with her pool, and she even has a good escape in that. She's not as dominant as some of these other picks, mainly because of range and area control. Scylla's Q can really only be in one place at a time after all. But despite that, she's still seen a lot of success, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Now we have both Tanfa and Glovyan. While these characters do have slightly different playstyles, with one of them being AMP and the other one being AP, they both essentially do the same thing of wanting to CC combo the hell out of someone and keeping them locked up while also outputting damage. Tanfa is more for burst of the AMP playstyle, using the AMP passives to heavily burst someone down, while Glove is more for sustain, staying in the fight, doing his combo multiple times before going down. Yan combos are volatile to missing, and while he is still very good at CCing someone down, there are a few better frontline characters, and also if you are playing Yan, you usually do want another frontline to be played with him, which again is not the best in the meta right now, but he is good.
Darko, another winner of this patch, and something we saw some placements on for ERM and ERCS. He's a very consistent character in the fact that you can just press R on someone and completely ruin them. He works good in dive comps as well as neutral comps, but he's not as tanky as some of the other tanks. He still serves a really good niche for being able to just blow one person up with his other carry. The main issue that you fight while playing Darko is you have to play into Razi a lot of the time, and that can be very hard for this character, leading to a lot of issues that keep him out of pick ban, but he's still very strong and good.
Next we have the strongest current weapon of Fiora, being Two-Handed Sword. Her weapon choices that make Two-Handed Sword better is Chained Nightmare has Cataclysm, which is very strong, with also having a very good weapon skill with the form of the parry. So Fiora is a burst assassin. She just has very high damage output. She has good mobility with her 2 dashes on her E. And then her ult will also stun any target hit. She just has very high burst damage. Her weaknesses are that she's not very tanky in return. She has good base stats, but no built-in sustain. And while she does have the high burst damage, she can be bursted down herself quite easily, aside from the fact when she's using her parry, which again covers for one of her weaknesses. She can be very good. She can easily kill someone with items. The only problem is not getting bursted down herself, which in this burst meta is difficult, but she also plays into the burst meta, so she has her moments.
Next, we have Shuriken Zahir, a less seen character despite his viability, mainly because of his inconsistency. During some of the more recent patches, we saw Zahir get some of his consistency buffed in the fact that now he starts with chakrams instead of having to earn them up. However, this still doesn't fix the main issue of very good players being able to dodge it, meaning you're taking a gamble when you pick this character, which is what keeps him out of pick ban. He's still very good, and you'll see some characters pilot him.
Next we have Hejin. Hejin is good for a lot of the reasons Haze is good. She has pretty good poke, she has good safety with her E, she has good CC with her fear combos and also her W. She has a lot of good things going for her. Shuriken and Bow both do essentially the same thing. Bow has a bit more utility, Shuriken is more for the slow defensively. Both of them are strong. They are just not quite as strong to be in the pick ban tier, but it's overall a strong character.
Next up, we have the spear variant. Jukai is a character that provides a permanent niche for anyone who wants to use him because of his food. The only issue with it is he's not the best tank in the format, but he'll always have a good niche here. He's an incredibly strong character with good catching potential because of his R, and he can really make some comps shine. However, he doesn't make them shine enough because he just doesn't feel as overwhelming as he normally does. Thus, he's only good right now.
Next we have Sylvia, who is primarily seen in ERCS by Frankie Doodle playing her. Sylvia provides a unique role of working as both kind of a support and a diver. She's able to sustain her teammates up with her healing and also initiate or help them along with a dive by using her bike combos to CC down a backline target, help her frontline, the enemy frontline CC'd. She's very slippery with pistol skill, blink, and also her bike movement speed. She's hard to track down, she supports her teammates with healing. She does decent damage herself, but not enough to one-shot someone. She provides a lot of damage, a lot of utility, just a good character. Not enough to be in pick ban, but overall has a lot of things going for her.
Rhea, a character we had previously considered for pick ban. However, because of all of the different items that were added to this patch, and just the change in the meta, some characters with great range who can deal with her more effectively definitely got put on a pedestal this patch, like Haze, for example, led her to only be a good pick, but she's not to be underestimated. This character has a lot of damage for a support, and even sometimes equal area control to Celine. She doesn't have as much consistency in that area control, mainly from her R, but it's nothing to slouch at. This character has been incredibly strong. Another thing that hurt her from being out of pick ban is the fact that Soul Stealer got nerfed, something that we might see again with this next patch.
Next we have Bernice. Bernice struggles from being a much closer ranged, almost melee marksman, but he also has a lot going for him with his CC and area control. Traps in specific areas can be near impossible to play against, as you just kind of are forced to walk through them if they find a choke that you have to run through to get to reach them. So he has very good area control. He has also very good CC and very high damage. His ult is very long range route, a long route that can also spread to teammates if the enemy team is too grouped up. But he also has very high damage. He has double auto attacks now, so he can use radar very effectively. He has high damage. He often wins the DPS race against other ADCs. The problem is just him getting into range and not being instantly killed. But he has a bunch of CC to help out his team. He has a lot of utility. He has good chase with all his Q slows to help out his team chase. Just long range, sniper skill is always good for utility in competitive play. The vision it provides. So Bernice just has a lot going for him.
Adela. Both Bat and Rapier are some of, if not the strongest, burst mages, able to kill most characters even on purple gear. While in most metas, this would immediately shoot her to pick ban, in the current meta, this makes her only good.
Lennox is another good tank option. She provides also being very tanky. She can deal decent amounts of damage with her Q having max health damage and her ult doing that true damage bleed. Lennox works very well with these double backline comps, just unfortunately not as good as Mai or Marcus. It's very hard to get to her backline when her E is up, same with her W. Not only knocking opponents away and also being able to pull them to you leads to a very versatile kit that makes it very hard to reach the backline. Oftentimes you'll have to kill the Lennox before getting to their backline to be able to kill them, which makes Lennox a very good option, just not as good as the other two tanks.
Alex, mainly played in dive comps with a tankier Helix build. Alex serves a good niche on these team comps, acting similar to Elena and being able to be the acting glue of the comp, bringing it all together with his zone control and disruptions.
Laura was mostly seen in ERCS as being a popular pick for both her mobility and consistent damage. With her rework, she changed to more of a bruiser playstyle with her sustain and her ult now shielding her, but she's able to dive into teams very easily, group them up with her ults, and output consistent damage while still being decently tanky as long as she hits her calling card for that extra healing. So Laura's good for, again, just being able to dive the backliners that are so strong right now. She can deal with the Razi decently well. She can deal with Nadine decently well. And that's a pretty strong thing to be able to deal with right now. Along with her high damage mobility, she's hard to catch. Pretty versatile with what she can do, making her a very strong character right now.
Eva. Some would consider her a worst Haze in the current format, but she has a larger uptime, along with some other slight differences, making her different enough to be considered good.
Next we have Felix. Felix is of course sprawling towards more of a crit DPS style rather than the tank variant he's seen in the past. Felix has a lot of good things going for him. Being able to dodge auto attacks is very good against a lot of the strong characters right now, like Nadine and Razi. Those are two characters that are picked multiple times and banned every other game, and he has very good matchups into them. His mobility allows him to actually play into those characters decently well, and of course he also, as long as he's getting his stacks up, has a decent knock-up into spear skill combos that can leave those characters vulnerable to the rest of his team. And of course he's building crit and a lot of attack speed, so he's also outputting a lot of damage himself. He struggles against getting bursted like many other of the DPS melees, but Felix is a character with a high skill ceiling. If played properly, which he will be in the competitive scene at such a high level, he can be a pretty good character.
Carla, a winner of the patch because of her new Cataclysm weapon, and a good pick sometimes. Having issues because of being outranged by picks like Haze keep her from being pick banned though.
Estelle is another frontline tanky character. She can output some decent damage. She will occasionally build Astronaut Helm or maybe even Colada Ring for providing a little bit of damage. Her Q also has max health scaling to chunk her opponents with that. Estelle is a very defensive tank. She can engage, but it's pretty slow. It can miss very easily. And since she is building usually 1 or 2 amp items, she can be bursted down a little bit easier than other tanks. What Estelle does have going for her mainly is her amazing team play. While her shield is up, she is very tanky herself with that amazing damage reduction she gets. But the best part about Estelle is really her ult knockup. If she is taking a lot of damage, she can use it on herself to stay alive a lot longer if she's being focused down. Or if someone jumps on her backline, she can ult them and then just make it instantly so that whoever's on them has to leave the area immediately or get knocked up and then get hit by her CC combo of being stunned by her Q and then maybe stunned again by her E. Estelle is hard to play into, especially if you're playing a dive comp into her, making her a good tank, just not the best.
Irem, a slippery character acting as a catcher in the current meta, providing high kill pressure that, along with her mobility, creates someone who can kill and run away at the same time, creating 2v3s almost instantly.
Theodore is another artillery mage that we have seen. Theodore, again, is very good. He has a lot of versatility. He outputs high damage, especially later in the game when he starts getting all those items, like Tellurian Timepiece, and his amp percentage item, I think is usually Holy Orders. You can also run Dragon's Fury for more team play of reducing their armor. But Theodore has a lot going for him. He has a lot of range. He has a lot of team healing. He has his ult to help his team engage or run away. And he's also, he's pretty easy to catch with his only real mobility being Blink. He can sometimes use his passive, especially early game when teams don't have as many cameras to help him win fights or stay alive. The main problem with Theodore is it's very burst oriented right now. Theodore teams really love the long sustained fights where he can keep them alive, output his damage, because his damage is a lot of damage over time. And so the main issue with him is the burst damage, but if he has the right sustained comps, he can shine. He has sniper skill for utility. He has a lot of range to play as well. Actually, very high range, outranging the top picks, which is also a good reason he's very good right now. It's just a problem of not being dove.
Debbie and Marlene, one of the premier bruisers of the format. For her solid damage and threatening wombo combo with teammates, she creates a good lockdown and flex bruiser. That's enough of a niche compared to the other bruisers, but not enough for pick ban.
Next we have Arda. Arda is very versatile in the fact with his ult allows him to do many different things. Mainly Arda is used for two different reasons, one of them being his ult W allowing for instant root combos, and the other one being for his RE, which allows for great team mobility with making over walls they usually shouldn't, or also dropping two melee characters onto the backline in specific comps. They have seen a little play, but for the most part Arda is pretty limited to these comps. However, still very versatile. He actually has a decent amount of healing as well from his passive, and also pretty good damage. You can, if you tank a full Arda combo as a squishy character, it wouldn't surprise me if you were down to like a quarter HP, and then his team can probably easily finish you off. He has that really good chase with his RE as well. It's really hard to escape an Arda. His cooldown is really low. And yeah, he just has CC combos. It's really hard to push into an Arda, chase him as well. Imagine chasing an Arda when there's two cubes on the ground you have to run through in a tight corridor, while also tanking his Q damage, which has a very low cooldown. It's just hard to play into Arda. So he's good. He just still, again, has some weaknesses, but is overall a good character that can shine.
Alonzo, one of the previously strongest tanks for his lockdown and amazing engage on full commit. However, he struggles against the current high tiers that can outrange and escape his point easily.
Next we have another bruiser in Kenneth. Kenneth is good in the sense that he works very well in the sustain comps with characters like Johann, who's up there in the pick ban tier. Kenneth has not seen too much play, but still has a lot of strengths. He has a lot of knockups with his Q and ult, and while his Q knockup may only last a quarter of a second, a knockup is still a meaningful interrupt. He has a lot of damage reduction with his W being constant as long as he is auto-attacking enough. And he also has decent mobility in fights with his E, decent healing off of Axe skill as well. He has a lot going for him. He does decent damage, he has decent tankiness. He has the things to be good. It's just, again, kind of hard for him to shine in such a powerful burst meta right now. But in sustained comps he can work very well.
The last of good, Lenore, bolsters a great neutral game with good safety. While she's outclassed in this matter by characters like Celine and Hayes, her ultimate is what ultimately sets her apart, allowing her to abuse all these auto-attackers that we see so many of in these comps.
On to our first character in the tier that can be built around. Again, these characters are good, they just need very specific comps to function. Leon is a character that we have only seen in ERCS of 9 Cash playing him. Leon is played in specifically hard sustain comps, almost always played with a Johann every game to help the Leon stay alive. Leon can output pretty good damage, with some of it being true damage in her ult. Wisdom Robe's really helping her. She's very tanky because she has the Johann with her, and also her ult is constantly healing her whenever she auto-attacks. Leon just has... she's hard to get away from once she's transformed with, again, she has a root, she has a pull, she has a lot of movement speed whenever she presses W, which has basically no cooldown. She's very hard to get away from. Her only problem is being bursted before you can transform, being bursted before you can get that ult off, which, again, we're in a burst meta, so that can be very difficult at times, but that's why we have this pick ban character, Johann, that's almost always played with her to help the team really find success with that comp.
Chiara, along with Leon, the premier funnel carry abuser. Chiara is weak until she gets 3 items online, and each one after multiplying her strength. This means she's great to play for and build a comp around. She's also pretty good results from a newer team in ERM, proving the legitimacy of the character, especially for the checkpoint format where you need to obtain a win to actually win the format.
Next we have another support character in Lenny. Lenny is also benefiting a lot from the buffs on healing factor. The only problem with Lenny is that she's much more comp specific. Lenny tends to like melee characters in front of her all the time, so that her Q gets a lot more value, so she can hit both of them at once, stuff like that. And having 2 melees with this only support in your backline is not the greatest in this meta. It can work, it's just not the greatest, as I said. She's very slippery. She has pistol skill, her W, her spring to launch people away. She has a lot she can do to get away. She has a lot to help set up the team. You can stun someone, shield your team at the same time, spring them into your melees. She can certainly be successful. She just has a hard time in the current meta.
Abigail. She's seen a good amount of pilots in both ERM and ERCS. However, she needs a dive comp and some decent catchers or disruptors to play with in order to really reach the strength she needs for competitive viability. Once that's obtained, though, this character becomes a massive threat.
Next we have Nikki, also playing more of a diver role here. Nikki is relatively tanky. A lot of them are building Ghost Bride now to have her play more of a tank and supportive role to help her team kill someone. Her ult is undodgeable unless you have some sort of CC immune or parry. So if she is able to find an ult on a backline or just a character that is a target and doesn't have access to their a way to dodge her ult, then she's ulting someone. She's CCing them with her Q. If anyone hits her, which can be hard to coordinate, then she's also getting an E stun. Person is going to be CC'd on top of the Ghost Bride with their armor shredded for a very long time while their team is hitting her. Nikki finds success against these teams that are really protective of certain characters, and then this allows her team to just easily destroy that one character. The problem with Nikki is that she is not the greatest. Again, they normally build some amps, so they're not super tanky, other than when they use their W parry. And again, with coordinated team play, even though Nikki does have a guaranteed ult on some characters, it's not as if they will always die. There are still ways to play around Nikki. Especially if your team has a Johann, you're not bursting them. Or, for example, other tanks like Mai can save them, or other characters can even just keep the follow-up on Nikki's attacks from getting onto the target, making Nikki the only damage, which is often not enough to kill a target. Which is why she can be built around to be good. She is just not very good on her own.
Piolo, a character rarely seen in competitive because of how weak he's been over the years, finally reached the strength for competitive viability this patch, only to see little to no play sadly. Maybe in the future we'll see Piolo become a solid pick like Jan, with a good comp, but not this time around.
Next we have Tazia, which I believe we only really saw briefly in ERCS. Tazia is a very weird place where she has decent burst when she uses her ult. She also has a decent amount of CC with her wall and her Q knockback when she's able to do that. Is it every 6 or 8 seconds? And it's very hard for melees to play into her, and she functions or plays a lot more like a melee character herself despite being ranged. She's constantly diving into her glass shards, which her glass shards kind of have to be near her enemies since they only appear when you hit enemies with your abilities. She plays very much like a melee. She has Totem to help keep herself alive, for her team to follow up on her plays as well. It's just kind of in a weird spot in the meta where it's hard for her to do her thing successfully. But when she is able to do her thing, it does work, but even the payout is not as great as some other characters. She's also hard to play, and if you do miss your abilities, then you're having a much harder time winning the fight. Other characters can just do her job a little bit better and a little bit easier right now.
Martina, one of the strongest ADCs with a very different playstyle, because of her stacks that warp how the game is played for her two teammates for the first night, forcing a defensive playstyle where she's dying over and over for stacks. If not for that, she would be in pick ban, but this volatility creates such an issue that needs to be solved through her teammates.
Next we have a rather interesting mage in the form of Bianca. Bianca's main strength comes from her obviously ulting into the entire enemy team. It creates a lot of space for her team to do things. It's often slowing a lot of them, and it can very easily split apart an entire team, making it very easy to focus down a single target. Bianca's have shifted towards taking Blink to guarantee their ult landing on top of someone, and her damage herself is pretty good still. She has a lot of burst damage. She's able to keep someone CC'd pretty well, with her ult slow being pretty substantial, along with her Q root. The ult slow, of course, helping her Q root land. It's pretty hard to escape from Bianca or to avoid getting hit by her ult, so it's kind of a test of can your team regroup if necessary and survive the Bianca ult. Which, again, even in competitive play, playing around it can be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. So Bianca's in a kind of a weird state as well, where she's good, but again, if part of her whole thing is getting teams separated, with Mai being such a prominent figure, and also characters that can get in your face and easily stop her RE from dashing into your team, like Marcus, or put a ton of pressure on you, like Elena, all these frontline characters are diving into you. It makes it hard to land that ult on those characters that you really want to hit with it, like on the backline characters.
Jenny saw a lot of success last season on comps that abused the fact she could be healed from teammates while on her passive. After they changed that, though, she's had a hard time showing up in the meta. Still a viable pick, but one who has to have the team built around her.
Moving on, we have the only viable form of Jackie, being Axe. The reason this weapon is more viable than the rest is that it is the best weapon for the playstyle of full assassin one-shot Jackie. She basically builds full AP and pen, and is hoping that she can one-shot a backline character without them being able to react much. The problem with this is, again, it's pretty easy to stop a Jackie from doing this, but if she is able to do it, she can be very successful. If she kills one target, then she's hopping onto the next, and the entire team's dead just because of this single character. The problem is, being able to do that is pretty hard for her right now. Jackie is a very one-dimensional character. She's also very easy to tell what she's going for, what she's going to do. As long as you have proper vision control, you can play against Jackie pretty easily. But if she has the right comp that enables her to get on these backliners really well, she can be successful, but again, it's not the greatest.
Pistol Aya is one of those characters that forces everyone in the lobby to play her game, including her teammates. A high damage, good escape because of her E, ult, and pistol skill combo. Carry that really forces her teammates to wait for her to poke before really being able to play. Because of this, the comps by nature have to be made for her.
Next we have both Glove and Tanfa Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo is also, like Jackie, a very one-dimensional character. He plays heavily for his wall slam, hitting the targets and stunning them, and then if he's Glove, he's autoing them. If he's Tanfa, he's charging up his ult. Normally, Tanfa would not be up here, but Tanfa has actually become very strong thanks to Cataclysm. And so now we're able to see Hyunwoo up here. The character is just 100% going for his wall slam. If he does or doesn't get it, the fight rests on that. So he is also, like Aya, hard to fit in comps. It's kind of hard to build around a Hyunwoo. And of course, if he hits the wall slam, the fight's won. If he doesn't, though, the fight's lost. It's pretty hard to play around. It's not super versatile, and it's very dependent on him hitting a single ability, which in general, being dependent on such a niche or like single mechanic is not great.
Bonadine. You could say that she's just a worse Nadine, but she offers something different to normal Nadine. It's the poke variant, and she's much better at using her Q and W for high-range poke and good area control. With bow skill to boot, this provides good vision control. The main issue is that recently her passive got capped, and capping her passive is really what made Bo Nadine work for these comps that would get it super high and then one shot and win the game immediately. It's caused her to teeter out in viability.
Next we have Soichi. Soichi is not a character you would expect to work in competitive, and we haven't really seen him play either, but he can work, right? Assassins can work, especially when Soichi is in a pretty strong state right now. The problem is that assassinating someone and doing a full Soichi combo on the backline, especially in these coordinated competitive play, is often very difficult. It's not like it can't work, but if you're against a super coordinated team that's really like very skilled, they know what they're doing, they're coordinated, he can often have a very hard time assassinating someone. However, he is very slippery. He needs to be focused down pretty hard as well, which diverts a lot of attention to him. So this actually can allow his other teammates to shine pretty well.
Kathy, an assassin with a very strong but linear win con, being her E or Suture. This limits her so much in a competitive setting, no matter the weapon. Dual swords, tanky, almost bruisery playstyle is taken advantage of because of the short time frame she has to play in. And Knife generally hopes to take advantage of poor vision control, which is rarely seen, forcing Kathy to be built especially for if you want her to work.
Next up, we have the reworked Barbara. Barbara is now a pistol weapon and plays for a much more defensive style, and while she is not the most strong right now, she works as a counter to many of the dive comps and kind of struggles against everything else, putting her in an awkward spot, especially since dive comps are around right now, but they're not the most popular. So she can have her moments against these dive comps, but kind of struggles everywhere else. She is very safe with multiple turrets, stuns, and pistol skills, but she still just struggles outputting damage when people are not diving into her kit.
Leon, this time a more defensive assassin that takes space with his Q and forces engages based off his teammates. We saw some Leon here and there last season, but not this time, as his place in the meta is just non-existent for how much you have to invest for him to work.
Daniel, along with the rest of the assassins, is in this tier as well. We saw Daniel a little bit in ERCS with the triple melee team. Daniel's very good at bursting down a single target. He also especially can help them even against the sustain comps, can keep them down even if he doesn't kill the target. He usually runs Blade of Truth and Ghostlight, which even for sustain comps, if you have a Johann, that 60% heal cut is going to be putting in work. So even if he doesn't kill the target, his other teammates often can, because he's still going to be doing a lot of damage. The problem with Daniel is, a lot of the time Daniel finds success by using dagger skill and getting onto that back line, but competitive teams are obviously very skilled. They know how to play vision control. They know if a Daniel's on the enemy team, how they're supposed to play to avoid his win conditions. So if he gets his win conditions off, he can be great. It's an instant win to the fights if he finds that backline and is able to kill them. The problem is finding an opportunity to do that, and also finding an opportunity for a team that is really able to utilize Daniel's capabilities.
Echion. The only viable weapon for Echion is Black Mamba at the moment. This is a tank/bruiser build that relies on him sticking in the fight for a while. Normally, this can have a solid hold in the meta, but with how fast everyone dies, much like Lyan, you need to invest a lot of your team slots into protecting him.
Next we have Aiden, who is also in a slightly weird spot. He is similar to Jan, where he wants to go in, do his CC combo, and crit someone out. However, he is slightly worse in the regard that his ult and his W are very telegraphed. It's pretty easy to stop him from doing what he wants to. He can be a good engage for a team if his ult is able to land. However, he also suffers from being pretty single targeted. He kind of does his own thing as well. He doesn't have much team play other than his ult being an AoE stun. So he just is not a great team play character. However, he can work. He's also struggles a little bit from, he can kind of dive, but also it's quite easy to stop him. You know, there's a Mize taunting him. There's going to be other tanks that can push him away. He just doesn't have great access to the backline. And he definitely needs a team that can help him find his strengths to be able to really shine in comps.
Our first character of someone does their job better is AR Aya, being a great showcase of the tier as a whole because there's nothing Aya can do that Nadine doesn't do better, along with Aya just having less things she can do.
On to our other marksman AR character, Isol. Isol has the capabilities to be very good. He just, right now, is not as good. He's, again, a worse version of Nadine. He has the tools to be good, and he has been very good in the past. If we saw some Nadine nerfs, or maybe some Isol buffs, it would not surprise me if he jumped up a couple tiers all the way to good, maybe even pick ban. He has a lot going for him. He has a lot of armor shred. He can deal with traps really well. He puts down his own traps. It's very hard to play into Isol, because you have to clear the area, you know. He has good chase potential, good team play with his Q ability, and he can be a little hard to catch with his E mobility and also electric shift. He has all the tools to be good, he just doesn't quite have the numbers right now.
Heart. Usually Heart is in a niche all on her own because of her strong ulti. However, this season, that was taken away, leaving an ulti with a lot more counterplay, meaning Heart has to have the stats and a comp to really exist in a niche. This time around, she just doesn't. Rozzy does everything she does, but better and more consistently at that. Tsubame, my specialty. The character is, on paper, the best competitive ADC. However, her stats are just not there at the moment, leaving her to be a worse Rozzy that can be countered by a lot of the strong picks at the moment. Like Marcus and Sua, because unlike Rozzy, Tsubame has to commit.
Next we have Fiora's Rapier variant. Rapier Fiora is often not picked as much. It leans a lot more into her offense with the Rapier skill engage, and a lot less into defense because she loses her parry. So it's often not as good because, again, Fiora is very volatile to being bursted, and parry really helps her stay alive. So it can be good when you, I guess, need that extra damage or extra mobility to get on the backline. It's more of a comp specific thing. It can work. It's just usually seen as not as good.
Adriana. There's not much to say about her. Everything she does is just done better by Hayes. Hayes even has a better item in the fact that she has her Cataclysm weapon at the moment, leaving Adriana no room in the current meta.
Next we have Throw Zahir, just the mostly inferior Zahir weapon at the moment. Throw skill it can be good. Throw weapons as well. While I believe the blood throw weapon is a bit better than Shuriken, Shuriken skill is a bit more consistent with its use than throw skill, and Zahir also often wants to be a bit more aggressive, with throw skill not helping him out as much because you already want a tank to be setting them up for you, and you don't really need to want to focus into your defense, so Shuriken Zahir is often better.
Two-handed Yugi, usually a solid pick as your flex tank. He's not allowed to exist right now because Marcus just does everything. Enough said.
Now we have Dagger Jukai. He's good for all the reasons that Jukai is good. It's really just a difference in weapon skill. We talked about Dagger skill with Daniel and how he really needs to find that opening, and it's hard to with the vision control of competitive players being much better. And along with Spear skill, just also offering an extra CC to Zukai's kit, which is already good. Spear skill is just often so much better for Zukai, which leads Spear to also just being better. Not to mention Spear weapons also give defense on all their weapons, which helps him stay alive a bit more. So Spear is just pretty much superior in every way, especially in competitive.
Throw Cecilia. She can really only outperform her Shuriken counterpart when there's a lot of melee characters going around because of how hard throw skill shuts them down. This is just not the case in the current meta, leading Throw to really struggle in comparison.
Similar to Cecilia, Arcana Emma has stronger benefits on Shuriken right now. Shuriken has a bit more passives it has access to. It has the Biotic Infusion passive that Emma can use on Shuriken, with also Shuriken's skill dealing damage and slowing, with Arcana just being kind of a little damage buff. So Shuriken's definitely finding a lot more play right now. It has more damage in general at the moment. It's just basically superior in every way as well. There's no real reason to want to run Arcana specifically for Emma right now. If Arcana got like a Cataclysm access or something, as Shuriken also doesn't have it, then I could see Arcana being much better. But as of right now, Shuriken is just a lot better.
All of Luke's benefits are just like Kenneth, except Kenneth does it better, especially into this meta, and even more into the competitive scene, with more team play where Luke really suffers.
Now on to another weapon. We have Batsua being significantly below Hammersua. Batsua was, I believe, a lot better in the previous season. However, due to Hammer getting buffs, due to not being used as much since she gained Bat, Bat skill has kind of fallen off a bit as Hammer was buffed, and people are also starting to run Ironclad on Hammer. I believe Hammer skill was also buffed during Season 5 at some point, which allowed Hammersua to be just a bit better. Hammer skill also has that defense shred, And of course, if you're getting that knockup from Sua's E, then hammer skill is basically guaranteed to land as well. As long as being a lot more AoE, you can hit multiple targets much easier than Bat skill can, so that makes Hammer Sua a bit better.
11. Mai has kept 11 out of competitive for the longest time now, and Mai would have to be banned and 11 overpowered in order for this to change.
Next we have William, who right now is being gated by Nadine being so good. William has previously had success in the competitive scene. When William is active, or his Q is active, he deals a ton of damage, maybe even temporarily outperforming Nadine in damage. The problem is that he's just not as safe. His baseballs are RNG, or so his kiting is not always where you want to go. Throw skill is not quite as good defensively as crossbow skill is, and his ult takes a very long time to go out. He's basically self-CCing himself for a full second, which can make it pretty easy to CC him down in that moment. So if you play for a team around him, you can work. There's just not a real point to play around him right now, but he does have the potential to be a very good character.
Nathapon is a catcher mage who just does less damage than Della and has a harder time hitting people than her too.
Next we have both Rapier and Dual Swords Camillo. Camillo is similar to Dema or Felix, but not quite as strong. Both of those characters have ways to negate auto attacks, which again is a very strong thing to have right now, and Camillo doesn't really have that. In fact, if you're ever using his ult in front of the auto attackers, you're probably just dying. And while the CC immune is very helpful at times, it's not as good as being able to dodge auto attacks right now. And he has the same problem that those boosters do, where, you know, they can be good, they can output deal good damage, they have good access to the backline. The problem is just being able to do that in a scene where the tanks are so strong right now, along with the backline characters also being pretty safe. So he has a problem doing his job.
Tia has much of the same combat pressure that Adina has, even similar range in CC. However, Tia doesn't have any of those supportive abilities that really make Adina into a flex mage, just leading her to be worse than her.
Next we have Isaac, who plays a similar role to Marcus but isn't quite as good. Isaac has a ton of sticking power, even more than Marcus, with his pretty low cooldown mobility, and also his movement speed increases, along with his new weapon he got, which also increases his movement speed. So Isaac can be good. He's actually in a very strong state right now. He's very good in solo queue. Just in competitive, he's not as great. He deals good damage, and he's also decently tanky as long as he's building somewhat for it. Tonfa skill helps out a lot. And he is able to easily kill those backliners by himself if he plays it right. The problem is that there's no real reason to pick Isaac right now when you can do Marcus. You'll deal a bit less damage, but you will be infinitely more tanky on Marcus.
Kadia is always fighting with Rio, as they do so many similar things, even having similar niches. However, Rio has gotten so much love these last couple of patches that the reasons to play Kadia are just too few. She's outclassed almost entirely.
For our final character here, we have Charlotte, who, at right now, is just a lot worse than Johan. Charlotte's healing is pretty good, however is only single target, while Johan can heal his entire team. She is benefiting a lot from the heal factor and new Arcana weapons that came out. However, she's just not as good. She doesn't quite have the team utility that Johan does. Johan has, a bunch of slows, which, she does have a slow, but it's AoE, it takes a while to go off. It's not as good as the constant slow that you have from standing on a sensor. She doesn't have a root or anything like Johan does. And also, while she does have the shield and the little invulnerability to help keep her alive, it's not as great. And her ult especially, while it is 2 seconds of invincibility, it's pretty easy to play around that, especially for coordinated players. They can easily bait out the ults, disengage, and then re-engage. She's very committal, which Johan does not have to do, which makes Johan a lot better right now.
All three of Jackie's other weapons run into an issue, being they aren't Axe Jackie. Jackie's such a linear character that generally only one weapon is viable and competitive at a time. Axe has a lot going for it at the moment. The weapons, the skill itself, the only one who could even ever match up in the future is most likely 2H.
Now we have the most inferior weapon of Aya being Sniper Aya. Sniper Aya is good for all of the reasons that Pistol Aya can be good, except she is just lackluster. Sniper skill is helpful for utility, but the only real thing that Sniper has over Pistol is her higher Q range and the magnetic midnight passive from one of the Sniper transitions. And while these are decent upsides, the upsides that Pistol gets is just a lot better with the extra movement speed and the overall more synergy, because while the extra Q range helps, her W does not get extra range, which requires Sniper to walk up farther than it normally would have, which is kind of awkward.
Vanya relies on getting her Q procs and walking back into them for her survivability. This is a lot harder to really have happen in competitive where everyone's on the same page. The tank knows how to dodge Vanya and still protect her carries. Equally, Vanya's main weakness being the strong ADCs that can meet the DPS check, they're always going to be played in competitive, leading to this lack of viability.
Next we have both weapons of Magnus, Hammer and Bat. Both weapons of Magnus kind of struggle with being very one-dimensional. They both require for your condition that someone is specifically standing to your left and near a wall for his only form of real CC. Other than that, he has a slow and a decent engage with his bike, but other tanks just outperform him for a lot, especially in terms of reliable CC and also a decent amount of damage and more utility. There's just no world where we can compare things like Lennox or Mai to Magnus and ever want to choose Magnus. And we have the worst Fiora weapon, Spear Fiora. Spear Fiora's weapon options for her transitions are just not really what she wants. Along with Spear skill is okay for her. It deals some extra damage and it can, if they're close to you, can push them into your Q sweet spot range. However, it just does not quite have the scalings to live up to it, and it's also a bit more clunky to play with her ranges being a bit different. It just suffers from also not really laying into her offense or her defense. We talked about why Rapier is potentially good for the extra offense it gives her, while Spear Skill doesn't really help her with her offense or her defense much, so it just ends up being the worst.
Pistol Isol is much like Pistol Aya, however, much less viable. Playing around his traps is relatively easy for competitive players, and his damage isn't high enough to warrant really bringing him in. This leads to basically no representation.
And now we have another melee, kind of assassin-style character of Glove Dailin. Dailin's issues are more with her character than her weapon choice. Uh, she has the ability to dodge autos, but she is still significantly worse than the other two characters that can, due to, one, she kind of builds for full damage, and like Felix does, but she doesn't quite have the mobility to get to the backline, and also she's very easy to get off of the backline as well. She has her 3 tiny dashes, her auto attack dodge has a longer cooldown than the rest, and while she can output a lot of damage if she gets on top of you, it's just not very good compared to the other two characters. Debbie and Marlene offer a lot more tankiness and also an AoE block of projectiles. And Felix also just has a lot more mobility. He can help set up the team with his knockup as well. Dailin has her ult, which can help, but once she's ulting someone, she's stuck in place. It's very easy to burst her down or CC her out of her ult. While Felix's combos are pretty instant, it's a lot harder to react to Felix blink knockup spear skill than it is to a Dailin being stuck in place for 2 seconds while she ults. She's just very reactable. It's hard for her to get in and do her damage. Very similar to Jackie in that regard. It's very difficult for her to find a way to get in and damage her backliners, dive them, assassinate them like she wants to.
Nunchuck Lita Lin is much the same as Fist. However, she has some of the best weapons in the game. This does not solve her innate issues in the current meta, although. If meta is more benefiting to her show up, you could actually see her.
Next we have our inferior Yuki weapon of DS Yuki. DS Yuki is often played in a crit assassin playstyle, and there's a lot of issues with that. Just like Dylan, it's really hard for him to get in and do his thing. Similar problems to DS Jackie actually. He needs to get in there, he needs to auto someone like 4 times to kill them. That just doesn't really happen. It's going to be really hard for him to do that. His only dash, or his only mobility or backline access is E-ing towards them with a dash that doesn't even go over a wall. He can use his D skill to get access to the backline, but that would require him usually using the first part of DS skill on the tank, and then if you're going melee range into the tank, you're gonna get CC'd and die instantly. Another problem with DS Yuki is a lot of the strength or damage that two-handed sword Yuki does comes from his ults, where DS Yuki you're kind of encouraged to not even use your ult. And if you did want to go for a more tanky playstyle for Yuki, then two-handed is just better because parry is a lot better defensively than DS skill will ever be.
Echion's last 2 weapons are Death Adder, a melee ADC, and Sidewinder, an AP poke mage. These run into similar issues as normal Echion, with Death Adder dying before they can reach the enemy, and Sidewinder being too low range for such a competitive environment that is constantly holding characters like Nadine and Hayes that outrange him sometimes by 4x.
Now we have Marcus's inferior weapon being Hammer. Hammer Marcus isn't entirely bad, it's just that Axe has a lot more. The main thing is that Axe skill helps out Marcus a lot with the extra healing. And while Hammer skill itself is good, Critical Blow functions a lot better on Axe as well. The scalings are a bit better. The mobility helps him out a bit. The auto attack reset. Hammer just doesn't quite have the numbers to stand up to it right now. There's not a huge reason why it's awful. It's just more of a numbers thing.
Garnet, the newest addition to Not Viable, she lacks a lot that a tank needs to exist in the format, similar to Magnus actually, where she doesn't have proper peel and lacks proper damage to be a threat, allowing most teams to ignore her, making it a 2v3.
And lastly, we have Yumin, who was not allowed in any competitive play as he was just released, and characters are usually not allowed in competitive play for a couple weeks until after their launch to make sure they're in a balanced and functioning state before being allowed. So we don't really know how he would entirely perform. However, he has strengths, he has things he can play for. It just remains to be seen how effective he really is in competitive play.
Okay, so Horizon just finished up, and I wanted to wait before I posted this video just so I could talk about it. Yumin landed okay in this tourney. We really only had 2, which was Silver Paw 7 and Kazcross. Silver Paw 7 was the main one. They were playing a dive composition with Darko, Arda, Yumin. This had a lot of problems for them because the current meta staple of Haze, their entire game plan, had a hard time getting up and running. They're also running into some other issues. Once the meta changes, it's more likely we'll see Yumin place in a good or even pick ban spot, but at the moment, it's safe to say he needs a comp to be built around him for him to see some major success. On to solo queue. We saw a good amount of changes in viability and placing in solo queue. Most of this is down to a difference in coordination and a higher chance that not all team members will have as good of an understanding as a lot of pros do. All of the major changes are in S and A tier.
Priya is our first character that has a pretty big change between competitive and solo queue. Priya is still relatively comp specific as she is in competitive, really thriving against the diver teams, but because of that, her movement speed and shielding just makes her a lot better in solo queue, making it harder to kill her teammates. And also, it's hard to focus her down as well because they usually have totem. She just overall works better generally in solo queue, which helps her to become a better support.
Zahir, while in competitive, he's a weaker mage who's easy to play around. In solo queue, he's a demon. His mains push him to his limits and put out so much damage. Other characters have a hard time really competing in this less coordinated environment where you're not always gonna have these perfect team comps to deal with him.
Kenneth works a lot better in solo queue as well. His main weaknesses was getting bursted, but in solo queue with teams being less coordinated, Kenneth is usually not being hard focus fired, leaving him to survive insane amounts of time with his healing and constant damage reduction. He also provides good CC for the team and still outdealing damage, making him a overall amazing bruiser character.
Piolo, another strong character in a solo queue environment, able to block projectiles which can be abused in these uncoordinated environments where there are times you're taking fire from all three enemies or even more people at the same time and just blocking it all before escaping because of his unique high mobility.
Rio has the range utility and self-peel to be an amazing character. The problem was that she was, in her damage, was just less than Nadine or some other S tier characters in competitive. In solo queue, it is slightly different, as usually it would require decent team coordination to properly lock Rio down and kill her, but as long as the Rio is positioning relatively well, she can stay super safe while dishing out high damage. Safer than Nadine, for example, because of her short bow ult knocking back.
Adela, another queen of abusing the lack of coordination and lack of Mai. Her low risk, high reward fork puts in work, all but guaranteeing kills from stray hits currently. Aya. While Aya would normally be outclassed by Nadine, Nadine does not have all the kit safety Aya does. Whereas Nadine has teammates to cover her weaknesses and increase her strengths, Aya's the complete package by herself, leading her to be better in a solo queue environment. Luke. Everything that makes Luke bad and competitive suddenly becomes his boon in a solo queue environment. Hitting Q1 on any of these builds, tank, bruiser, assassin, can completely win a fight in seconds. His W and E make for great tools in this less coordinated environment, and his ulti was always good, but he gets more out of it with the Q1 ult Q2 combos.
In A tier, Isaac is our first character. Similar to Kenneth, he's a strong bruiser that's both tanky from his healing and Tonfa skill. Isaac also recently got a new Tonfa weapon, which helped him out with the streamlined passive and shield. Isaac is just really amazing at catching out backliners, sticking to them, and bursting them down with his high single target damage. It's much easier for him to fulfill this job in solo queue, making him a really good character.
Now, these are a lot of characters, and 3 of them are mainly assassins, with one of them not being as much. The assassins of Daniel, Kathy, and Soichi just do so much better in these solo queue environments. The main one is a lack of coordination. They're not as easily focused. But the other one is they're allowed to really hit their abilities on the targets that matter and get away with a lot more than you would think. Lyanne especially. Lyanne can find cameras on the ground to get her form up, other animals. There's just so many more places that she can play around. She can play with her knife invisibility and flash into these devastating combos because, in these settings, there's a lot less vision control. There's just a lot less versatility in what these picks can do because you're not always fighting the best players on the best characters. Because of this, these assassins do so much in punishing these small positional mistakes. Say, your ADC or mage is standing slightly too close to the tank and Kathy hits a double suture into them. That fight's just over. And that happens really commonly in a solo queue setting compared to a setting like competitive where they're constantly thinking about that.
Another big change, William moves up. His RNG mechanics are not as impactful, and he has that extremely high damage output that really lets him destroy other characters in 1v1s that he often takes. William can be very oppressive against melee characters, and also it's harder to focus him down. Another big problem with William is that usually competitive focuses around the 1 to 2 really good marksman characters, but that doesn't really exist in solo queue, so William can actually still output a lot more here when he isn't against the best marksman of the patch every single game.
Magnus. Magnus sees a big change here, going from not viable to A. And there's a reason for that. Magnus's damage is really respectable, and his wall stuns happen a lot more often, along with his bikes. properly connecting to the targets they're aiming for. More again, this is mainly because of the lack of coordination. This opens up a lot of characters to be hit by him and increases viability. The other main reason why you don't see him over the other tanks you might think you'd see is his own agency. Having all of this damage on this character means you can do a lot more to win a fight than just sit there and hope your team wins, like someone say 11.
A huge move from the bottom to the near the top. Dylan normally has a lot of issues with walking up as a squishy melee to deal damage, which of course is still an issue in solo queue, however not nearly to the same extent, as she is very well equipped to deal with auto attackers, which a team might have a lot of, so she can be able to exploit that a lot better without focused team comps. She's also just harder to burst down in solo queue because teams are less coordinated, and she can still get one shot, but if she does get on someone or is in a 1v1 scenario, she's usually going to win. Her ult is also a very good CC tool for her team, and also a good escape tool for herself to get out and survive longer.
Vanya, when she's hitting and catching her Qs against these melee comps, she's pretty much just immortal. This never really happens in a comp setting because you always have your Vanya answer to make sure you don't get DPS checked by anyone. But this doesn't exist in solo queue because, sometimes you just get 3-1 tricks and they're not going to think about that. They're just going to lock in their main. So Vanya's a lot more likely to thrive in these environments where teams aren't auto-countering her. Jenny, her passive is less likely to be hard countered with cams in these solo queue environments, so she can play a lot more aggressively, she can get away with more. This allows Jenny to actually be A tier because she's allowed to function in a lot of these team comps and in a lot of the fights that she takes.
The last character we have is Alex. Alex has a lot of utility and also decent damage. He really thrives in these dive comps, but he's a generally all-around useful character. He has good numbers right now and does well in the meta, being able to survive all the burst damage with his Tonfa and two-handed sword skill. And he has great entry for his team with the bruiser-focused builds and still decent damage and setup, even on his other builds as well.
And that's all we have for you today. A long one, but a place to start. And with that done, we can cover individual characters with some more depth and nuance in upcoming patches, along with some other ideas of where the metas will go with the changes they'll be implementing in the dev stream. Again, remember to leave your comment. Top 25 will be added to the bingo sheet. What do you all think is going to be revealed at this next dev stream? Till then, good luck in the end of the season climb.